Flirt FM, Galway's alternative radio station.
Good afternoon, you're very welcome to 35 Shots of Film with myself, Ken Lennon, and Jane Kearns in a special Breaking Bad themed episode. And we are back after Rocket Scientist, which plays in the trailer for Martin McDonagh's Seven Psychopaths, which is our movie connection, but is being played because it is in season... What is the season of Breaking Bad where Jesse takes Walt's money and uses it for a club of nocturnally inclined women?
It's in season 3, but it's actually a flashback, just
it's
from
a
season
flashback
1.
Scene, yeah, I know. Yeah.
Himself and Combo. It's
Combo,
him remembering Combo after Combo.
After Combo, just stuff happened.
Yeah.
That's all we're going to say. Okay, anyway, as you can tell, if you're a fan of Breaking Bad, you might really enjoy the show. If you're not a fan of Breaking Bad, you might find aspects of it slightly overly singularly driven towards certain passions. Okay, but we will talk about films. And Jane, I guess we'll jump straight into it. You have a brand new premiere release of Woody Allen's latest film, which stars Cate Blanchett, Sally Hawkins, Alec Baldwin. The film is Blue Jasmine. You're about to hear Jane's review of it. Jane, take it away.
It's a great film. I saw it last night. Woody Allen's new film. I actually didn't know he had released a new film until I went to the cinema and this was what was on. But I was very pleasantly surprised by it. It had a really good cast. Like Ken said, you had Cate Blanchett, Alec Baldwin, Sally Hawkins, Peter Sarsgaard and Louis C.K., who I am obsessed with. I got very excited when I saw his name. And basically it's kind of a typical Woody Allen film, neurotic people, the backdrop of a big city that is like another character, but it's very, very good. Basically it's about Jasmine, who's played by Cate Blanchett, who loses everything after her husband Alec Baldwin does some morally and legally unsound things towards the end of their marriage, and she ends up having to move in with her kind of working class sister who lives in San Francisco, and it's about their relationship, and it's cut in between Cate Blanchett and Alec Baldwin when they were married, and their relationship, and how it went from being very good in this ostentatious life to not a very good life, and Cate Blanchett's kind of mental deterioration and stuff. She ends up having a nervous breakdown and talks to herself a lot, which is how you get to see what her marriage was like before. Like a scene will go from her talking to her sister to talking to herself, and then it'll zoom in and it'll be like a flashback to her and Alec Baldwin having a conversation about him buying her a diamond necklace or something. But that's it basically. It's about them finding new boyfriends, new husbands, a lot of lying, trying to just get over what happened in the past. Alec Baldwin's character actually did something to Sally Hawkins and her ex-husband in the past as well, which kind of brings them all together, brings the story together, and it's very good. It's quite sad, but I really enjoyed it.
I'm just trying to process all of that. So one thing I'm shamefully low on Woody Allen titles that I've seen in my lifetime. I know there's a particular brand of comedy that he's in part mostly very famous for, but I read about Blue Jasmine that it's actually more, slightly more scathing and more, maybe, I'm not saying his other films aren't character orientated, but is it less of a Woody Allen comedy and something more dark, more slightly acidically dramatic? I don't, because I read a review along those lines, or I read a synopsis along those lines.
Well, like if you compared it to films like Vicky Cristina Barcelona, it's not as funny. Vicky Cristina Barcelona, the characters are very funny and quirky, and they're quirky in this, but they're a lot more unhinged, which is a lot considering Penelope Cruz's character in Vicky Cristina Barcelona,
for which she won the Oscar for.
Yeah. It's not as funny.
Is it trying to be as funny though?
No, there are some very funny scenes with the sisters, like boyfriends and stuff, but overall it's not, I didn't laugh a lot at it. It was quite sad, really.
That dreaded word, does poignancy come into this at all? Or is it just a very depressing but very what if you're, I'm just trying to think of Blue Jasmine now. When you're saying it's a very sad film, I don't get a great sense of it's a funny film.
Yeah.
in what you'd expect, or is it a surprisingly dark? Because it's been compared, her character's been compared a lot to Blanche Dubois in A Streetcar Named Desire, who Kate Blanchett has played on stage in New York. And then when Woody Allen was asked this, he said, I hadn't made the connection. And when Kate Blanchett put it to him, I think she did an interview over at BBC. So I guess what I'm asking is, if you're going into this, I mean, what should people expect without giving away major plot points or spoilers? If this is competing with Runner, Prisoners, something like R.I.P.D., which we'll get onto later, what's going to sell this to people?
If you like Woody Allen, you will like it. It's This
is one of his better recent films.
Oh, definitely. It's the follow-up to From Rome with Love, which didn't do very well, didn't get great reviews. And before that was Midnight in Paris, which is very good. Vicky Cristina Barcelona, they're all very good.
You and Me, A Tall Dark Street. It's weird. He's recently seemed to have got into one where people are saying it's a return to form. One where people are saying, so you've got like Vicky Cristina Barcelona, you've got whatever came after that, you've got You Will Meet a Tall Dark Stranger, which isn't very acclaimed. You'll have Midnight in Paris. So this is at the higher end of his recent stuff.
Yeah, oh, definitely. The characters are very, very good. Alec Baldwin is very good in it. Quite the charmer. Kate Blanchett, very good at playing the unhinged woman. She actually reminds me of someone that I know, which I don't know if that's a bad thing or not, but she does.
Is it somebody who appears on the show from week to week?
No.
Okay.
Sally Hawkins, very, very good. I thought she was absolutely brilliant. She plays her younger sister, and she's just does such a good job. And yeah, generally it's good. You're not going to be laughing a lot, but if you want to see kind of a touching story that's, a bit depressing, it's worth seeing.
Fair enough. So triumphant return to form for Woody Allen again, before maybe he goes off and makes a disappointing film and makes another great film. Like Blue Jasmine, which is out in IMC theatres and in the iCinema in Galway at present. Okay, and now Jane, our next film we're going to go into, one that I saw over the weekend, and a good friend of mine is very desperate for me to discuss it on air because it really hit him. And the film is Prisoners. It's directed by Jane, I can't remember. It's a French-Canadian director. I've just drawn a blank. Do you have it there?
Denis
Villeneuve. I'm sorry, I'm an atrocious pronouncer of anything French. Anything that isn't...
Villeneuve or something?
Villeneuve. Anything that isn't bog standard English, I'm an atrocious pronouncer. It's filmed by Denis Villeneuve, the director of Incendies, and it stars Hugh Jackman, Jake Gyllenhaal, Viola Davis, Terrence Howard, and Maria Bello, and Paul Dano, and Melissa Leo. And this is there's a mystery thriller procedural in which two young girls. The film starts off at Thanksgiving dinner. Hugh Jackman and Maria Bello play a married couple. They go to the house of Terrence Howard and Viola Davis, who we know from Crash and The Help. I was just going to think of Doubt. Yeah, Viola Davis, who's an actress.
Small roles in a lot of things, but does quite well in those small roles.
She's very highly respected among the acting fraternity. Denzel Washington was doing a roundtable Oscar interview last year, and he said doing a scene with her that terrifies him, that he looks very shabby next to her. That interview is up on YouTube. It's him with John Hawkes and the other potential Oscar nominees from last year. So I'm not making that up. But yeah, very, very high caliber cast. And the film starts off with a Thanksgiving dinner. The two families meet. They're getting along great. And very shortly, the two girls disappear after a suspicious looking camper van has been driving through the neighbourhood. Very quickly, we're introduced to Detective Loki, played by Jake Gyllenhaal. The camper van is located with Paul Dano, who we know from The Girl Next Door, There Will Be Blood, and briefly Looper, among many other things. Ruby Sparks,
Little Miss Sunshine,
which I still haven't seen. Why am I the one in the presenter's chair? Which might be changing. Jane could very well be
next week.
Yeah, kicking me out.
I could be destroying things.
Mutiny. Yeah. And they find Paul Dano's character, who is described in the film as having the IQ of a 10-year-old. And basically what kicks this, a long film, the reason I'm setting this, there's a lot of plot to set up. It's 2 hours and 40 minutes long, which might be, I've seen Jane's face. It's maybe a huge issue for some people. I went to see it with two friends and they were equally impressed with it, if not more so than I was. And basically when they can't hold Paul Dano's character because there's lack of evidence that he is involved in the crime, Hugh Jackman's character believes he is involved with it. He thinks he knows where the girls are. He kidnaps him in order to extract information, and that is literally the setup of Prisoners, which follows kind of Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal's characters' parallel attempts to, which do converge, of course, to find these two missing girls. Jane, just having set up the film now, it's a 2-hour, 40-minute film about missing children, and I think I used the term when I was trying to review it, moral corrosion. Does this sound like the kind of thing you'd like to hunker down for 2 3/4 hours nearly to watch?
I'd like to see it. Just from your description, the first thing I thought of was The Green Mile, honestly.
Really?
Yeah, you know the way Sam Rockwell's character,
yeah.
You know, the little girls and everything, just made me think of that.
Interesting comparison, actually.
It sounds good. Is Paul Dano good in the role? I really like Paul Dano.
I haven't even gone into the review part of the movie. That was all set up. But getting on to, Paul Dano, very quickly, to answer Jane's question, he's playing a mentally deficient, he's playing somebody who has the IQ of a 10-year-old, we're told in the film. So he doesn't really, his role mostly consists of him being kind of effeminately, mentally challenged. So he has maybe 10 lines of dialogue in the entire film. It's just a very... One critic, Catherine Shord, who was reviewing it on The Guardian, she didn't give it a terrifically positive review, but she said it was the kind of role Paul Dano would have done if his career had gone very badly. It's very... But you know the way Paul Dano has a certain... Even in things like There Will Be Blood or Looper, there's a certain, erraticness to him, or kind of a... the quality he has?
His characters are always kind of... unlikable, kind of.
Not even unlikable, just there's that. But you know the way he's a very peculiar screen presence sometimes.
Yeah.
Here he's playing somebody who doesn't really talk, who's mentally, the best thing I can say, the most political thing I say is mentally deficient. And he doesn't talk. It's like a 10-year-old in Paul Dano's body, and that's the way he plays it. But he doesn't have much to say. So it's him basically being brutalized by Hugh Jackman, and being very quiet before that and being very quiet during that. So he doesn't really have a huge amount to do compared to the other characters. That's one thing, as we're getting into the review part of this potentially bloated description of Prisoners. It's basically Hugh Jackman and Jake Gyllenhaal for the bulk of the film. There's very little in terms of Terrence Howard, Viola Davis and Maria Bello. Maria Bello spends most of the film in her bed hysterical. Terrence Howard and Viola Davis only have a handful of scenes. So what you're following is Hugh Jackman, you're following Jake Gyllenhaal, and it's been compared, Prisoners has been compared kind of superficially to something like Zodiac, which has Jake Gyllenhaal, which is over 2.5 hours long, which is a mystery procedural. I don't think it's anywhere near in that. I think Zodiac is like the high watermark for anything like this. I don't think it's compared that. But it's a very grueling, very satisfying, and very... One thing my friends, Sean Downs, who wasn't able to come on the show, and another friend of mine who saw it with me, thought... the word un-Hollywood came up a lot. There's a lot of very awkward conversations between people who are very emotionally charged because their children have just been taken, between Jake Gyllenhaal, who's really, the more I think about it, the more I think he's very, very good in it. He's playing this detective who you don't really find out anything about him, but it's clearly something he's gone away and he's built a character in his own mind before the film, and he's covered in tattoos. He's a very particular haircut. You can't see most of his tattoos. They're around his body, and you see, like, every now and again there'll be a close-up of his fingers with one tattoo on each. He's constantly blinking throughout the movie, which was singled out for criticism, I think, sort of by the Guardian film staff, the elitist crowd, who I'm, for some reason, I keep focusing on, because all the other reviews of it I've read are actually generally quite positive. But and I thought halfway through, it's quite distracting. And then it clicked with me, oh wait, he's sleep deprived. He's an obsessive cop, and he said, but not in a very overt way, not in a very, it's not played kind of cheaply or broadly, you know. He has a scene with a police superior, his captain, where he says, if you had done this, if you weren't going to put surveillance on this person, you could have just told me and I would have sat outside the house all night. It's not made in a big deal. So that's what I'm trying to get at, is there's very minute little things that he conveys through this kind of twitchiness, because he's clearly somebody who's constantly engaged, but he's also very tired. So there's a lot of very heavy blinking. And about halfway through it, I realized, he's exhausted all the time. But you don't really see it, do you know what I mean? You get the impression from him that there's segments of the film where he has to go off and basically interview all the sex offenders in the neighbourhood. And this is like the feel-good film of the holidays. And you kind of get the impression he has a sort of haunted look about him. He kind of knows the kind of territory these girls are in. and he's not afraid to go in there to try and help them. So he's a very good man, but somebody who you feel has a very tragic backstory, but you don't find out what his backstory is. So it's a very subtle, layered, and some people might think it's not subtle, and one of the criticisms about Prisoners is everybody is apparently overacting, which I don't agree with, but it's a very layered performance, I think, and I think he's terrific in it. The more I think about it, the more I find his character more sympathetic. Hugh Jackman is, I think, volcanic is the best way to describe it, and he has been criticised for overacting, but I do think, as someone who's got many brothers and sisters, if one of their children was taken, the incomprehensible anguish somebody would feel, I think he plays that the way I would imagine somebody would lose a child, how they would react. And the big thing of the film is him morally disintegrating as he does horrific things to Paul Dano's character because he thinks he's the one who knows where the kids are. Just to wrap it up, it's got a kind of a labyrinth quality to it as the longer on it goes. And I did say it is 2 hours and 40 minutes, which will, I think, immediately... I was trying to get 6 or 7 people to go see this with me. 3 of us ended up going. I said to one person who was on the fence, it's 2 hours, 40 minutes. She was just, no, I think I'll stay in. It's a very grueling, long haul of a movie, but I didn't find it dragged. And I find the ending, the last stretch, I found very satisfying, even though it's been criticised for going into kind of generic thriller territory, for relying on plot contrivances, and for basically undoing. I read it in Little White Lies and the Kermode and Mayo Show and The Guardian. It undoes a lot of the good work it does by becoming a very outlandish thriller in the end. I didn't find that, and I went into it, when you know something's been criticised for something and you're immediately looking for it. I didn't find that towards the end. I found it very satisfying, and it has a very nice way of ending, which is just kind of has a classy ambiguity to it without sounding completely pretentious. It's about 10 minutes too late, Ken. I think it's very good. It's a very tough watch, but it's one of the... I'm not a professional critic, so I don't get to see hundreds of films a year. Of the films that I'll have seen in 2013, I think this will probably be one of the best. But I've only seen a handful of films in cinemas this year, so...
It's a strong statement, though.
No, it isn't. I hate to say it's not a strong statement because I've only seen so many films this year. So I just think it does make you... It lasts after it finishes. Some people will find it too long, and not in a bored way. It's just baggy. There's too much of it, and maybe the ending is contrived. I didn't find that. I think there's great performance from Jake Gyllenhaal in there, which really I did think about afterwards seeing it for the days since. Very strong performance, I think, from Hugh Jackman. He's been criticised in it for overacting. I think it's the reaction I would expect from somebody who's lost a child. Not that I would know what that is, but you know what I mean. And there's a nice supporting as well from Melissa Leo, who's maybe the third most involved person. She plays the aunt of Paul Dano's character. So she's also got somebody who goes missing midway through the film, and she's somebody who has... her relationship with him in a very sympathetic way is something that the film also has a little bit of, and her relationship with him. So there's some nice scenes between her and Hugh Jackman, who of course is the person who ends up taking Paul Dano, which is at the start of the film, or the 40-minute mark. So you have 2 good hours of him being missing. I think I'm done. Prisoners, very, very strong. Sean Downs wanted to text in to say how much he loved it. But maybe I will finish this review because we are pre-recording, so Sean won't get to text in, just saying, Sean said, and it's a good quote, it's a movie that should be talked about. So, Jane, you've been on... okay, I think I'll stop talking for 10 minutes. But would you go see Prisoners?
Apart from the length has put me off. It does sound good, though, and I like Jake Gyllenhaal. I'd like to see him in a role like that. I might check it out.
Yeah, the length is the one thing, because even when you say to people it's about child abduction and long, torturous, soul-degrading, when you say to them, it's 2 hours and 40 minutes, you can see it. I remember saying it to a friend of mine going to see it. It just cut her interest in it. It was like she was on the fence about going. 2 hours, 40 minutes, no.
Oh, yeah. That would happen to anyone, though.
I know, but I mean, Zodiac is probably my favourite film, and that's 2 hours.
Zodiac's your favourite film?
I think it's the one that I have the highest regard for. But again, I know I'm presenting a film show, but I'm not somebody who has a archival knowledge of the great cinema. I only have a working knowledge of things that have come out in the last 15, 20 years.
Yeah, still though.
Well, it's definitely one that I'd have the highest. It'd be in that bracket of films. You might not have one particular film that's your favourite, but it's in that bracket of that's as good as that film can possibly be. I think it's as close to perfect as any film I've seen, but there's plenty of films like that.
Yeah.
You could rattle off 10 films that you consider classics, I'm sure. I mean, even Woody Allen's films, his earlier films, we were talking about Woody Allen earlier in Blue Jasmine. So
yeah, Annie Hall, a lot of people would call that like perfect cinema right there.
Or even films that, like Apocalypse Now, that are considered very imperfect but are all the more brilliant for it. There's a kind of messy, insane genius in it. So I've been talking for a very long time. We're going to jump into our next song. We might have a review of R.I.P.D. afterwards, but as we're coming up to the half-hour mark, Jane and I have Breaking Bad to digest, and we might have a cursory review of R.I.P.D. at the end of it. Jane, have you seen anything else recently that you want to talk about?
Nothing recently. The most recent thing I've seen was The Heat, which was in the cinema up until last week.
Oh, it's out of cinemas?
It was out last Friday, I think. I think it was taken out. But
you didn't get to see anything, because I noticed things like Monsters University are still knocking about.
I still haven't seen Monsters University, and I am horrified with myself for not seeing it, because I love Monsters Inc.
Yeah, I don't think we do. We have any other film stuff that we can squeeze the juice out of before, because when we start about Breaking Bad, I don't think there'll be much of a stop.
All I have to say is that this is a special week. You know, we're not going to be talking about TV again for the rest of the year, and Breaking Bad is a big deal. So,
and on that note,
1, 2, 1, 2, 3.
Okay, Jane has got a review of Blue Jasmine. I've done Prisoners. Now we're going to swap over to television. And Jane, the series finale of Breaking Bad played last Sunday night for American viewers, Monday morning for us Irish fans. We waited and caught it on Netflix together with a group of people, Breaking Bad aficionados. Jane, what are your feelings now that this story of Walter White has come to an end?
Well, you saw me at the end of the episode the other night. I am very sad that it's over. I feel empty. It's just, I can't believe it's over, that I have no more Breaking Bad to watch, no more new episodes.
Now, we should say Jane and I are going to go into a very spoiler-heavy discussion about the Breaking Bad finale. This is exclusively for people who have watched the show up to the end of Season 5, Episode 16. If you aren't one of those people, you shouldn't be listening into this. The first half of the show is our film reviews. This is a once-off 25-30 minute discussion about the Breaking Bad finale. So, Nick Leeming, if you're listening to this and you shouldn't be, I will come to your house and pistol whip you. Okay, Jane, you were watching it before me, so I guess we should get the ball rolling with you. You want to go into Felina, episode 16 of season 5, the final Breaking Bad episode?
It is the end. Felina was the finale. It was an anagram for finale. And it was the end of Walt's story. It all came to a head, everything was tied up, and it's done. And I feel very, very sad that it's finished, but I'm quite happy with the ending. Were you happy with it?
I was very happy with the ending. We're gonna discuss a bit, because this is a film review show, and I guess we will be effectively reviewing Felina to a degree. I was very happy with it. I know there's a certain amount of fan criticism I want to talk about regarding what has been perceived as the finale playing to fans as opposed to necessarily playing to the show's strength up to that point. Do you want to kind of go into that argument? Because one of our regular contributors who sadly couldn't be here today, Niamh Kelly, she's alive and well, she just couldn't be here. It sounded like she's dead or something, which I wouldn't wish, because Niamh is a key member of this. I also owe her 70 cents. Anyway, Bayern Munich beat Man City 3-1. Anyway, I'll get aside from that. There's a certain amount that Jane, do you want to discuss, like the criticisms of Felina?
Niamh and a lot of reviews I read afterwards were talking about how it was for the fans, like it was ending it for the fans, not for the story. That it kind of it all went a bit too perfectly. Like if you've watched the show, and if you're listening, you have.
If you haven't watched the show, please stop listening now. Yeah. Even if you're one of those people, if you're listening to this, you shouldn't be, unless you've watched the show up to the finale.
Because we're going to ruin literally everything.
Yeah, everything will be ruined. Yeah. We'll go out of our way to ruin stuff.
Yeah. Basically, you know that things don't always go according to plan for Walt and Jesse. Things always go wrong. And in this episode, everything went right for Walt. Like he left the bar at the end of Granite State, and that was a fantastic scene.
Magnificent scene.
Yeah, and then it picks up where it left off, and from there on, everything just runs very smoothly.
Just to very quickly, and really worth setting it up, because if you're a fan, you know what happens, but he's on his way back to Albuquerque to take out Jack's gang. and to settle things with his family, basically. Should we start really with the visit to Elliot and Gretchen's house?
Yeah.
I think that's where...
We should start from the beginning.
Yeah.
It starts off with him visiting Elliot and Gretchen Schwartz, who you might remember from series 1. He was in that company Grey Matter with them, which is now like a huge conglomerate, multi-millionaires, and he left it early on.
We should also point out we're not going to do a huge amount of explaining, because if you're a fan, you don't need us to explain this, and if you're not a fan, you really shouldn't be listening to this.
Yeah, well, he ends up in their house, and this scene, when it started, I was like, oh my God, Vince Gilligan has ruined the show. I thought he was going to kill them because he was angry at them, but he wasn't. He went to essentially give them this small bit of money he had left, which was what, like $9 million?
I think it was something like, no, it was 9,700,030. It was a rather substantial sum of drug money that Walt still had left from his meth building business.
Yeah, and he went in and...
Meth building? Are we accepting that term?
Meth building.
Meth building? Meth manufacturing. I think we'll go with a bit of MA. Anyway.
And he basically threatens them into taking the money and keeping it until Walter Jr. turns 18 and they can give it to him. And he says...
Under the guise of Grey Matter, but the money itself will come from
Walt. But Jr. will never know that. And that's the sad part of that, is that Walt did all of this in the beginning for his family, and so that he could leave his legacy behind. But basically, this money that he worked for is going to his family from the people that he hates. Yeah,
I mean, I think we're starting with, I guess it's the point that this is the beginning of things working very smoothly for Walt in the final episode. But I do think it's worth pointing out crucially that, like you said, the whole show begins with him wanting not to accept Grey Matter's charity, as he would call it.
Yeah.
So for him to actually have his money funneled through them and through the guise of them, that's the only way he can get it to his family.
Yeah.
But there is a certain amount of him giving up the ghost of Heisenberg, giving up the ghost of being the man in control, and just getting the money to his family. And it's... do you know what I mean? I don't consider that... I guess what I'm building to, and we'll talk about it later, I don't consider the ending to be a particularly triumphant one. I mean, I know it is, but...
It's not, though. He's
already lost everything.
He loses literally everything. Like, by giving the money to Gretchen Elliott, that means his legacy is lost. His family hate him anyways. Just everything is lost.
Well, I mean...
the reason he does it all in the beginning, it's gone. And he's losing his pride by giving them his money, which was a big part of Heisenberg.
Well, that is Heisenberg.
Yeah.
In
that scene as well, this was one thing that was definitely playing to the fans, was the appearance of Badger and Skinny Pete.
Yeah, but worked into it in a way that made sense as well, I think. I mean, Walt gives them laser
How did he contact them, though?
He would have had their numbers.
I suppose. But yeah, in that scene...
because remember, he gets called by them, I think, several seasons back, or they arrange a meet anyway. But I assume he would have had their number through Jesse, because they were foot soldiers for him and Jesse way back in the beginning. And I'm pretty sure there's some scene, if you trawl through Breaking Bad, where he's calling them on a cell phone or something, or vice versa.
But
and plus Facebook. No, but like, they wouldn't be hard to find, I don't think.
No, probably not.
And he probably But
he when he's in Gretchen Elliott's house, he threatens them and says that he has hired the two best hitman west of the Mississippi, and then two targets are pointing at their chest, and he says that
it's a fantastic scene.
Yeah, that until they give the money to Junior, these guys will be following them and could kill them at any point if they ever go to the police. And you think, oh my God, this is a serious threat. But then he gets into the car and it's just Badger and Skinny Pete with laser pointers, and that's the end of that scene.
Which is, I think that was the first kind of air escaping the room when the two red lasers appear on their chests.
Yeah.
There's just a gush of wind or gush of oxygen just got sucked out of the room. It was a really pow kind of scene.
Yeah. And
the first of many, and what I still think was a fantastic finale.
Yeah, from there, it's just Walt trying to get back to Albuquerque, and it ends up with the scene between him and Skylar, which I absolutely loved.
Oh, I think it's a fabulous
You liked
scene.
it as well, yeah.
Oh, I loved it, yeah.
He goes to Skylar's, after he goes to the old white home and gets the rice. Oh my God, I'm leaving so much out here.
Well, basically, you've got the flashbacks, which we've seen at the start of season 5 and the beginning of the middle, once they break. So season 5 episode 1, season 5 episode 9, you have two flashback scenes, and we basically see truncated versions of them where Walt gets the machine gun turret, which he will later use against Jack and the Nazis, and you see him collect the vial of ricin from the house. And then after he has collected these things, there's a phone call scene between Marie and Skylar. Marie, played excellently by Betsy Brandt. I think it's her only scene in the episode. And it's her talking to Skylar about rumours that Walt is back, or that he's been spotted. He has been spotted. Their neighbour sees him after he gets the ricin. And we have this scene where it's revealed Walt has been in the room with Skylar the entire time. She's been listening to Marie's warning. And they have a very wonderful exchange, which, as Jane is the longest serving Breaking Bad fan, Jane, do you want to, shall we divvy up the scenes that we want to talk about? Or
let's just keep talking this way.
Fair enough. There's just a lovely scene between him and Skylar where he comes back and she gives him 5 minutes and he just wants a proper goodbye. And he confesses, he's honest with her for the first time in a very long time, where he says that
he did it for himself.
I did it for me.
Yeah,
I was good at it, and I was alive.
Yeah.
And I think that registers with her big time. And again, it's something that's always on the face of the actors, Anna Gunn and Bryan Cranston. It's played wonderfully, and it's not a speech. It's just a very quick scene. He asks her, "Can he see his daughter one last time?" And you have it's a very lovely, sad scene.
Yeah, it's a really good scene between the two of them, and you can see as they're speaking to each other that, Skylar, there's so much relief when he admits for the first time that he was doing it all for himself, that he was being selfish. And you can see that they still care about each other in the goodbye, but the goodbye isn't like anything romantic. They don't embrace or anything. They just say goodbye to each other, and that's it. And I thought it was very appropriate for their characters. I really liked that scene.
No, I did too. And again, it's the only scene with Anna Gunn in it, but it's a very understated goodbye. And also he sees his son one last time. And again, for people who maybe think the ending was very triumphant for Walter, and I know you do get that impression at the end, but as I said, his goodbye to his son is his son, who now hates him and blames him for the murder of his uncle Hank, who of course was a big father figure to him, arguably more so than Walt ever was, or at least in the show's running time. I don't know what the relationship between Walt and his son was before the show kicks in. They don't really go into it a great deal, do they? But the impression you get is Hank is you have that scene when Junior is arrested for trying to buy alcohol in season 1, I think, and he calls his uncle as opposed to his father. But basically his son hates him. His wife is terrified of him. His daughter will never know him. The money he's getting to them, he's going to get through the people that he probably are among the top 10 people he hates in the world. The people who maybe potentially screwed him out of a multi-billion-dollar empire, or he walked away from for reasons that maybe weren't very acrimonious. So that then leads us to Walt building a machine gun, building a machine
he
gun.
goes out to the desert and builds the machine gun. He's building the robot that Jesse asked for in series 1 or 2.
Yeah.
Or the Dune buggy.
Dune bugging their way to freedom.
Yeah. And you see him building that, and he's, having one of his, Heisenberg moments.
I think that's very much a Walt moment, just constructing something and being very intelligent and using his wits about him. It doesn't really go back to season 1 where he destroys Tuco's place, but I that's the thing I think, and it's something that if Niamh were here, we'd have a slightly more argumentative show, in a good way. I think it's Walt at the end is who you've got. I think all the, like you said, all the hubris, all the pride, all the ego is very much stripped away. And
you can tell that the aim was to go full circle and bring him back to just being Walter White.
Down to the clothes he's wearing.
Yeah, I was just about to say, even the clothes he's wearing. The clothes he's wearing when he goes to see Skylar, and for the rest of the show, is the exact same clothes he's wearing in the first episode. Like the kind of the light greens and the beige colours, the same clothes. And he has his hair back, he's like Walt again. And
rocking a beard though.
Yeah, has a cool beard.
Yeah, he does.
It goes full circle that way. He goes back to the much more sympathetic man that he was in the first series. But yeah, he builds a machine gun, and before this, we haven't mentioned this, he meets Lydia and Todd.
Oh yeah, that's true.
He goes to meet them in the cafe where he used to meet Lydia every Tuesday, and that's how he knows she'd be there.
Every Tuesday at 10 o'clock for weeks, or for a year they met there.
Yeah, and that scene is very good. He walks in, you see them speaking, and he's waltzed in the background, and then he just very casually sits beside them at the table, and, Lydia's horrified. And this is how he gets the in into the neo-Nazis camp. He tells Todd that he has a new way of making meth, and he needs the money. And it's more cost effective than using methylamine, and he thinks they're probably running out of methylamine at this stage. And Todd falls for this, and Lydia is very, very dubious of Walt at this stage. But the end of that scene is really good. I think you liked it with the tea.
Well, this is another thing, and again, we're going into stuff that's been criticised about it. It is mentioned that it is incredibly convenient that Lydia sat at a certain table where Walt was able to puts Stevia. Walt has the rice and vial, and we are basically told by the camera, Lydia shakes her packet of stevia, which we know she does, puts it into her chamomile tea, and the camera literally lingers over the top of the cup with the dissolve, and it's just basically like, yes, people, she has the rice. And very debatable as to how Walt would know exactly where she was sitting. There's a line he has later on when he's on the phone to her and she's got the rice, and where he says she's a creature of he says it to her there and then, creature of habit.
I think she sits at the same table every week. I think that's what the point of that line is.
Yeah, and she comes to the same place, she sits at the same table. So I think we're left to believe that because Lydia is so predictable and she follows very rigid, I meet you here, I sit at this table, it's debatable whether or not Walt, you can imagine him putting it down and her sitting somewhere else and him frantically, comically scrambling in the background to pick it up. But I buy that scene.
Yeah, I like that scene.
And I do think, in terms of fan service, whatever you want to call it, Lydia isn't necessarily a crucial element of the show, so I don't think killing her, it makes sense for him to kill her, and also she does deserve to die.
Yeah.
The thing she's
it was
done.
another loose end that had to be tied up.
It was a loose end, and whatever else people may think about the show not being ruthless to itself in the last episode, which I completely disagree with, and again, if Neve were here, we could really... You and me are just basically kind of agreeing with each other.
Yeah, well, what people wanted was like just an all-out bloodbath. Skylar to kill herself.
Oh, yeah. I didn't want that.
Marie to die, Walt to die, Jesse to have
you don't
a
know
horrible
who I
death.
wanted to die? I wanted the Nazis to die.
And
Walt to come to a conclusive end. And the show delivered that.
That's what happened.
Yeah.
After that scene with Lydia and the scene with Skylar, Walt goes to the Nazi compound. And that is where it already kicks off.
And we know that he has in his trunk I don't even know, it's a machine gun turret that he's assembled, that he got off the gunman who we see in an earlier season selling him a handgun. We see him again give him this this giant weapon. And it's basically a mini turret, as I was saying, and it's in his trunk. And we know from watching him assemble it that once he clicks a button on his key,
it will start shooting.
It will start firing. Jane, do you want to walk through this?
In that scene, there was a few more complaints. Like when Walt pulls into the compound, he gets out of the car and is patted down by some of the neo-Nazis, and they take his keys and his wallet, but they do not search the car at all. That's a big complaint. That why did they search him and not the car? Anything could be in the car, and anything was in the car. But after that, he goes in and meets Jack and basically says, I know you still have Jesse and you're working together. And
well, this is after Jack completely shuts down any pretense that he's going to work with Walt again.
Oh yeah. And they take his stuff off him, and the keys are moved away from Walt, so he doesn't have the keys to let the gun off.
Yeah, he's patted down and his wallet and keys are taken, and the guy who takes them comes into the room with them and puts it on a pool table just out of his reach. So
yeah, therein
lies the tense setup.
And yeah, then from there the scene is very tense. Walt is trying to grab the keys.
And we meet Jesse.
Todd goes to get Jesse, and that scene is absolutely horrible. So hard to watch.
Should we go into why? This is another thing. I read a review on IndieWire Playlist who were criticising a couple of things about the finale, and the idea that Jack is played by Walt to the extent that he is, where Walt says to him, basically calls him a liar, and you see Jack react to this in a very prideful way. That's why Jesse's brought in. That allows Walt the chance to see Jesse, and that in itself is a great stroke of fortune. But did you have any complaint with this?
No, I thought that scene was believable and would have happened in a different episode.
And it's very well played by Michael Bowen, the actor who plays Jack. He makes a point that his entire family, his Todd is his nephew, and he's been insulted by this man, and they've all been called liars.
Yeah.
Being a murderer is not a problem, but being questionable of your word is a bit of an issue apparently with Jack. But it's played very well, and you do buy, I think the character would behave that way. And he thinks he's got Walt completely cornered, which physically he does. Why not bring in Jesse and then shoot Walt? I mean...
Yeah. And the scene where Todd brings in Jesse is just heart-wrenching. He comes out and he's standing in the shadows away from Walt, and he's got shackles on his hands and his ankles, and it's, you know, Jesse is as low as he has ever been.
I think the way to describe he's all spirit. He looks like a figure where all his morale has just been crushed out, and there isn't an angle where he can escape. He tried. Andrea got shot.
He's stuck there.
He's literally stuck in servitude perpetually for these very sick, deformed people depraved people who have killed Andrea, who will kill her son if Jesse doesn't continue cooking for them. And he just looks horrific. I mean, he's got
scars on his face. His hair's all grown out. He looks so scared when he sees Walt. You can see there's still fear in his eyes, and it's very well acted by Aaron Paul.
As everything in the show that he's contributed has been.
Yeah, that scene was hard to watch. And around that, Walt is trying to grab the keys off the pool table.
Yeah, as Jesse's being brought out, you just have, and the camera's lingered on the car keys, so we know that's what the key thing in the scene is. As they're waiting for Jesse, this is before Jesse's brought out, as he's being brought out, you just have Jack waiting for him and Walt edging towards the table, and it's an incredibly tense scene, because if he doesn't get it, everything goes to crap.
It is very tense because Jack keeps turning around.
Yeah, Jack keeps turning around and kind of just looking back and forth and looking kind of impatient, and yeah, it's a terrifically one that he does pick them up, and then he meets Jesse. And I think, going back to one of the things I love consistently about the show and about the final episode, is the meeting between Jesse and Walt is played without words, and it's just looks on their faces, and it's played to perfection by the two actors. Yeah.
And when they do come
the sadness in Walt's eyes when he sees what Jesse has become as a complete and 100 unequivocal result of 100% result of what Walt has done. Walt gave him to the Nazis. Walt brought him into this world to the extent that he's in it.
Like, you can really see at that stage that Walt does feel bad for Jesse, even though he's done so many horrible things.
Lo and behold, my creation.
Yeah, like, you know, at the end of the day, throughout this, there's that father-son relationship between them, and you can really see it in those final scenes that Walt does care about Jesse, and, you know, he feels so bad seeing him like that. And in that scene, then, when Jesse is brought out, Walt jumps on Jesse and knocks him to the ground, and it looks like he's trying to fight with him. And as he does this, he presses the button on his keys, and the gun starts firing. And, well, take it from there, Ken.
Basically, Jack gets badly wounded. The rest of the Nazis get shot to bits. Walt gets hit by the ricochet of the bullet while he's covering Jesse's body. And he very much does shield him. Basically, the turret opens up, it starts firing, and Todd's already on the ground because Jack told him to pick up the two guys. So you have a situation where all the Nazis get taken out, Jack gets badly wounded, Todd is still alive, and Jane, I think as Aaron Paul's number one fan, you should probably describe what is maybe the most satisfying scene Jesse has, at least from his own perspective at this point.
Oh, it's such a good scene. After everyone is dead,
bar Jack and Todd.
Yeah, Todd gets up and runs to the window and goes, "Oh my God, Mr. White, what's going on?" And as he does this, Jesse jumps up. He's still wearing the shackles on his wrist, and throws them around Todd's neck and begins to strangle him. He drags him to the ground and is strangling him. And the scene is long, and you can see the effort that he's going to try and keep Todd on the ground and to kill him. And he finishes him off by breaking his neck, and that's how Todd ends. And I think it's just a great way to get Todd out, for Todd's story to end, for Jesse to be the one that kills him, because he's done so many horrible things to Jesse. And throughout his run on the show, he was like the anti-Jesse, very polite, where Jesse was quite rude, but then had no morality, where Jesse had a lot. So I think it was a really good ending between those two characters.
And just seeing Todd get the life strangled out of him is glorious.
And you hear his neck break.
You do, it's wonderful.
It's such a good scene. And then Jesse gets the keys off Todd and unlocks.
And we should say, now this scene I want to just linger on for a moment. It's Jack's final scene, and he's wounded. Walt picks up a gun, slowly walks over to finish him off. Jack, who again, as I said, played by Michael Bowen, who's kind of a Tarantino regular. He was in Jackie Brown, although it's been a long time since I've seen Jackie Brown. I can't remember who he played. And he plays Uncle Buck, I think, in Kill Bill. And he has this scene, which again is kind of Tarantino-esque. He's wounded. He just asks, "Hang on, don't shoot me yet. Wait a minute."
While he smokes a cigarette.
He picks up a cigarette that's on the ground. So he's just been shot. He retrieves the cigarette he had, or that he was lighting before he got shot, is smoking this. And yeah, he's saying to Walt in a kind of a, I still know where all your money is, because Jack, of course, has Walt's $70 million. And he says, if you pull that trigger, you'll never. And Walt shoots him in the head. Yeah. Very much in the way that Dean Norris went out in Ozymandias in season 5, episode 14.
Midway through the sentence.
Yeah, and it's a wonderful moment as well, because it's something as well I do find it does stay true to the character, because at this point, Walt has surrendered to maybe Walt, as opposed to if it's Heisenberg.
He would have kept him alive to find out where that money was.
Yes, but he just fired. And the look on Walt's face is kind of a look of, I know it's going to sound contradictory, but sort of satisfied resignation. He doesn't care about the money anymore. It can't do anything for him. And we're conveniently coming up to, I guess, we're going to say like our what we really finally feel about this ending. Yeah. But then we have, after Jack's shot, Walt throws the gun to Jesse.
And it's their final scene together.
Their penultimate scene together.
The last 15 minutes, it's all Walt and Jesse. And he throws the gun towards Jesse and basically asks him to kill him, to shoot him.
Now he says, you want this.
He says, you want this. And Jesse goes, You
want this, and I'm not going to do anything until I hear the words out of your mouth. Yeah. To which Walt says, I want this. And Jesse, who thinks long and hard about shooting Walt, finally just says, then
do it yourself,
and throws the gun down. And in a great breaking of the I will not be manipulated any further, sir, thank you and good night, breaking
the ties finally. He's finally going out by himself, Jesse, and he's not letting Walt manipulate him anymore. He's not doing what Walt tells him for the first time in a long time.
And crucially, he knows Walt has got a gunshot wound to his side, which is bleeding very heavily. A good chance to use the word profusely, which in Irish, if you wanted to say you were sweating profusely, is husig me e queralis cativ. Now for you. And Jane, anyway, continue.
Okay. And from there, Jesse walks out of the house and Walt follows him, doesn't he?
Walt follows him, and in a lovely moment, Todd's phone starts ringing before they leave, and it's a very strange Lydia themed.
Yeah, it's a ringtone it's a song, and it's basically they're just saying the name Lydia over again.
Lydia,
in
sweet
her
Lydia,
lovely blue dress and stuff. So there's the blue coming in again, and Lydia's on the phone. Walt picks it up and. Basically,
Walt, she thinks she's going to talk to Todd. She's asking, is it done? Walt says it is. Lydia realises she isn't speaking to Todd, and Walt just informs her, if you're feeling under the weather, it might be the ricin I gave you. And he doesn't tell her to enjoy her slow, debilitating death. He just throws the phone away with a goodbye, Lydia, which is the death she deserves, off screen, forgotten about, slow, painful, because Lydia has been a real backseat murderer throughout the show.
Yeah, it was a good end for her.
Yeah, I mean, it was a pathetic end for somebody who deserved a pathetic end.
Yeah, and she was a character that wasn't liked. And
Well, I don't think they did that to her because she was an unliked character. I think they gave her the death that she deserved. And again, you weren't going to see Walt gun down Lydia, but the ricin, it's a pathetic death for somebody who has... You have that scene earlier on when the neo-Nazis take the guys out who Walt initially gave... Remember the 35% stake in his meth empire, and Lydia is brought there, but she doesn't want to see the bodies that she is responsible for. So Todd literally has to lead her out
with her eyes covered.
A despicable character in a very banal way. It's just she kills people like it's a business transaction, and I think she deserved the death she got. So.
Yeah, I think she does well. But then after that, Jesse walks outside, Walt follows him, and you get their goodbye scene, which there's no words exchanged.
There's no words, and as you showed me right after the show on your phone, the camera angles, which Vince Gilligan, obviously, he shot the pilot and he shot the finale, and the camera angles mirror the first scene where they're both outside. They're about to go into business together. Walt effectively blackmails Jesse, and you have the shot of them by the car.
Yeah, there are a lot of scenes and moments mirrored in that last episode that were in the pilot.
Yeah.
Which I really liked. But yeah, that one in particular, it's Jesse and Walt at the car just staring at each other, and it's their goodbye. And at this stage, they've made peace with each other as much as they can, I think. And
again, it's just played with a look on their face.
Yeah, and it's so well played. And then Jesse gets into the car and speeds off into the night. And that scene, I think, was my favourite.
I think
shot of Jesse's face.
The shot of and the euphoria on Aaron Paul's face just at escaping. And again, I thought this was a character who has lost basically everything. I didn't think you could have it ending with Jesse that felt the way that moment did. but you totally buy it. Just the euphoria he has at being alive and
it
getting
was so
away.
well played, because you see in his face that he's euphoric, but he's also scared and in disbelief that he's driving away from this. And
I mean,
Aaron
he's
Paul
sort of
just did
shell shocked.
Aaron Paul did such a good job,
and it's such a cinematic thing. He gets into the car, pulls out, breaks through the fences in the compound, and is just hurtling through the night in this old car. It looked like a sports car.
Those last 10 minutes are so cinematic throughout the whole.
The whole
series.
episode is,
but throughout all of Breaking Bad, it's very cinematic. The way it's shot, the colours, the music, everything. But those last scenes in particular stuck out to me as like so cinematic. The close-up of Jesse's face, and then after that, when Walt goes into the meth lab and the zoom out, it was just so cinematic and so lovely to look at, and just I loved it.
Well, the final scene then is Walt alone in the meth lab, looking at what is effectively his creation, and he sees the respirator.
Yeah, and picks it up and looks at it.
Which is an iconic image from the first two episodes. Picks it up, looks at it, and the very final thing is Walt looking at one of the containers that they're brewing the meth in, and his image, a recurrent motif in the show, and it's not original to Breaking Bad, but earlier on in the show, when he's facing death, when he's found out he has cancer,
in the first episode or second episode,
I can't remember, but it's very early on. He hits a hand dryer, and his image becomes distorted as Walt is going to become increasingly different from who he was or what he is throughout the show. At the very end, his image is still a bit hazy, but it's a lot more realised than what we're seeing. So it's a nice way of saying the character, as compromised as he is, has come to a resolution and is at least being honest with himself, which I think is a big thing. And then it just ends to the sound of Baby Blue, which you're going to hear at the end of the show. And I guess I got
that scene is gorgeous. He falls to the ground and you see the blood coming out from his body, and it zooms out away from his face, and the song starts playing, and then you see the DEA agents coming in, and that's it. That's the end of it.
That's the end of it.
And it's such a good ending.
It is, and I mean, we have to wrap it up now, but I find the criticisms of it, I don't know, I was tremendously satisfied by it. It's the first television show I have been up to date on as it's finishing. Other shows I've liked have been out on DVD, and I've been able to watch them through to the end.
This was different to any other show I've watched, because I've never been this invested in it. And been watching it like week to week, and I'm so glad I did, because it was such a good show, and the acting and the writing, the directing, it was all so good. Like, we haven't even spoken about the actors, but they were all so amazing. I
mean, from Dean Norris's Hank, who went from being this
kind of a meathead,
to being an incredibly nuanced character. Again, I look at the speech he has after he beats up Jesse, and I think is at the end of season 2, or might be start of season 3. Oh no, it's season 3, I think, because then the silent twins come after him, and his speech about the universe trying to tell him something he's not the man he thought he was.
He has a few very good speeches like that as it goes on. There's another one later on where he talks about when he used to have a job in college, just marking trees and kind of.
There's also season 5, episode 9, when he finds out who Walt is. The sudden transformation of Hank to this mentally shell-shocked is the best way I can describe it. He looks physically like something has completely torn him up. I didn't know how Dean Norris was going to be able to play that, because it is literally the moment in the show where everything gets revealed and everything breaks.
Dean Norris really upped his game on that last 9 episodes.
I don't know if he necessarily upped his game, but I think he's been consistently excellent. I just think he was given the big revelation in the show, and he actually carried it. I mean, how can you show that next scene?
Yeah.
And he plays it very believably again. I know for a show that takes its sort of occasionally fantastical turns, and it's about a meth kingpin, but I mean, that's the way, shell-shocked.
Yeah.
That's the way he plays it. And that's what you think.
Such a good job. And if he does not win any awards for this series next year, I will be surprised.
Other cast members, we don't really have time, but
Giancarlo Esposito, Gus, a favourite for a lot of the fans.
Neve's favourite character.
The best villain, I would say. So good. The kind of quiet, he was quietly dangerous, and he was, so put together, but, still so, he could do anything. He was such a good character and so superbly acted.
As Bryan Cranston said about Giancarlo Esposito, when that character turns on you, there's this film that seems to go over his eyes, and a look that just is sharp.
Yeah, he has a look.
Yeah, spectacularly played by Giancarlo Esposito.
Jonathan Banks.
Jonathan Banks is Mike
one that-
Ehrmantraut, a quiet professional who Walt kills unceremoniously in season 5, episode 7. Bob Odenkirk as the
Your
greasy. I actually don't know. I mean, Walt is. I'm not saying that I'm morally for Walt at all, but as a show, as an entertainment, that character I think is the most interesting, the most complex, the lead. He's the character that I wanted the show to end with.
Yeah.
I think in terms of supporting characters, because I do think Walt is the one ultimately you're following. In terms of supporting characters, I cannot decide who I prefer out of Saul and Mike. Saul is getting his own spin-off. I would say you don't get a lot of heavyweight emotional scenes with Saul.
No.
Mike, you do, and I love Mike for that, and I love what he brings to it, and I love his quiet professionalism.
And Mike has some very, very good...
His half-measures speech is just
one of
magnificent.
the best.
And his death scene, again, just to briefly go into the technical thing, Michael
way it's
Slovis,
shot. Beautiful.
who... We both saw the interview on Speakeasy with Jonathan Banks. If you're a fan and haven't seen it, Jonathan Banks, Speakeasy, Breaking Bad, YouTube it. The cinematographer, Michael Slovis, ran up onto a hill with a camera, unbeknownst to Jonathan Banks, and they're filming his death scene. And that wonderful image of Mike at sunset, slumping, that slump, he didn't even realise it was being shot. Magnificent Jonathan Banks, Bob Odenkirk, who was fantastic as a dirty criminal lawyer, Saul, as opposed to a clean criminal lawyer.
Anna Gunn, despite the fact that a lot of fans really, really don't like Skylar, Anna Gunn is this fantastic actress, and she won her first Emmy this year for that role.
Deservedly so.
Yeah, and the last couple of seasons she has been fantastic, and she really went from, the unknowing wife to getting embroiled in Walt's empire, laundering the money, wanting to kill off Jesse and
wanting to kill off Jesse. What's one more body?
Yeah, she becomes a Lady Macbeth type.
She shows as well her own disintegration, but also she never fully reconciles it to the extent Walt does for so long. And finally, she does snap when she finds out Hank dies, and she blames Walt. She thinks he's directly involved in his killing.
That whole scene in Ozymandias between her and Walt when they're fight,
struggling for the knife.
That is one of my favourite scenes in any show. So good.
And it's that episode is so disturbingly grim. I mean, you then proceed to Walt's son with cerebral palsy trying to get between his mother and his father in this knife fight.
And Walt's screaming, "We're a family." And
that scene, that cuts very deep, the way he delivers that line.
That entire episode is fantastic.
And then he picks up Holly and walks out. And you've the shot of Anna Gunn running in the street screaming for her daughter. I mean, compared to Bryan Cranston successfully taking out the neo-Nazis and Jesse getting away, obviously the ending has a certain upbeat quality to it. I think in retrospect, it's very telling of the show that having lost what he worked for, admittedly he gets his money to his family. His family hate his guts. His legacy is completely destroyed. He dies alone in a meth lab.
He's surrounded by his baby, though.
He is. I just think it's very typical of the show that this is considered too upbeat an ending. And again, the people he kills. I think Niamh has made the point. The show really ends at Ozymandias in terms of everything breaks. The last 2 episodes are tying up resolutions, which I think...
It had to be done.
I think it did. And I think it'd be crushing as fans, especially in television. I mean, it's one thing having a movie slightly open-ended. We talked about Prisoners earlier, and there is a degree of ambiguity in that ending. But I think to end the show like that, I don't really have a comparison because I haven't seen all the way through The Sopranos. To end it like that would be... I think it would be crushing. I don't think it would be satisfying. I don't think they betrayed the integrity of where the show was going.
Fans are going to complain either way.
But I do think there hasn't been much. It hasn't been a fallout about it. I don't think it's been that divisive.
There was more complaints with the The Sopranos when that ended. Even though that's a fantastic ending. But a lot of people complained about that because it was quite an ambiguous one. But the end of Breaking Bad, and for that show I think it needs to be tied up, because as the show goes on, loose ends are tied up at the end of each series.
Jane, do you want to have the final word before we cut to Baby Blue?
I'm glad that we both got to watch Breaking Bad, that we followed it, and that we were here for the ending. And it's a show that is going to go down in history. This is the golden age of television, and Breaking Bad is at the helm of it at the moment, and I'm just very glad that I got to enjoy it.
Well, that's our lot for Sprouting Fandom. Next week we'll be back talking exclusively about films. I'm Ken Lennon.
And I'm Jane Kearns.
And Jane, thank you for your Breaking Bad contribution. And again, I do think you should get the very, very last word sentence on Breaking Bad.
Okay, so we're going to close this out with the final song in Breaking Bad, which is Baby Blue, which was used absolutely spectacularly at the very end.
Thought you'd realize I would know. I would show.
The Shannon and Court of Appeal referendums are tomorrow.